The sound of galloping hooves pierced the pre-dawn silence as Lena Owen raced through the Arizona Territory wilderness, her arms wrapped protectively around a small bundle hidden beneath her tattered shawl. Her heart pounded harder than her horse's hooves against the dusty earth. She glanced back, terror etched on her face, seeing only darkness where she knew men with lanterns and rifles would soon appear. The year was 1876, and Lena had just escaped from a nightmare that had consumed the past 2 years of her life. Castle Dome was supposed to be a mining town of new beginnings, not the prison it had become. As the first light of dawn crept over the distant mountains, Lena's horse began to falter, its breathing labored from the punishing pace. She needed shelter, water, and most importantly, safety for the precious cargo she carried. "Just a little farther, girl," she whispered to her exhausted mare, a horse she'd stolen from the very man she was fleeing. The irony wasn't lost on her. Victor Holloway had stolen 2 years of her life, and now she'd taken his prized mare. It seemed a small compensation. The bundle against her chest stirred, and Lena tensed. "Shh, Emma, we must be quiet," she murmured, adjusting the shawl to reveal the face of a sleeping child, barely 18 months old with copper curls that matched Lena's own. The child's face was pinched with hunger, her little body too thin for a toddler her age. As the sun climbed higher, Lena spotted a creek cutting through a small valley. She guided her horse toward it, desperate for water. The mare practically collapsed when they reached the bank, and Lena slid off, her legs nearly buckling beneath her. She knelt by the water's edge, splashing cool liquid on her face before offering some to Emma, who had awakened and was whimpering softly. "I know, sweetheart. I know you're hungry," Lena whispered, her heart breaking. She had managed to bring only a small pouch of dried beef and a half loaf of stale bread, not nearly enough for the journey ahead. The sound of a twig snapping caused Lena to freeze, her maternal instincts flaring. She pressed Emma to her chest and turned slowly, eyes wide with fear. A tall figure emerged from the trees, the rising sun at his back casting his face in shadow. All Lena could make out was the silhouette of a wide-brimmed hat and broad shoulders. "Madam, you all right?" The voice was deep but gentle, with a slight drawl that marked him as someone from the south. Lena's hand went instinctively to the small knife hidden in her boot. "Stay back," she warned, her voice surprisingly steady despite her fear. The man raised his hands, palms forward. "No need for alarm. I mean no harm." He stepped forward slowly, and the sunlight finally illuminated his features, a square jaw covered in stubble, piercing blue eyes, and a face weathered by years under the harsh western sun. "The name's Samuel Lawson. I've got a ranch about 3 miles east of here." He nodded toward Emma. "Your little one looks hungry." Lena stiffened. "We're fine, just passing through." Samuel's eyes narrowed slightly, taking in her disheveled appearance, the too thin child and the exhausted horse. "Madam, forgive my directness, but you don't look fine. That horse is about done in, and there's no town for 30 miles in the direction you're heading." A wave of despair washed over Lena. 30 miles. They'd never make it. Emma needed food and the horse needed rest. "I have food at my ranch," Samuel continued, his voice softer now. "And a proper bed for the little one. No questions asked if that's your concern." Lena hesitated, weighing her options. Trust was a luxury she couldn't afford, not after what she'd been through. But Emma's soft whimpers were growing more insistent, and the reality of their situation was unavoidable. "How do I know I can trust you?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Samuel slowly removed his hat, revealing thick dark hair streaked with premature silver at the temples. "You don't. But I give you my word as a gentleman that no harm will come to you or your child under my roof." Something in his steady gaze made Lena want to believe him. Perhaps it was desperation, or perhaps it was the simple kindness in eyes that seemed incapable of deceit. Either way, she found herself nodding. "Thank you," she said, "but we'll only stay long enough to rest the horse." Samuel nodded, replaced his hat, and moved to help her onto her mount. "You ride, I'll lead." The journey to Samuel's ranch seemed to take an eternity, though in reality it was less than an hour. Lena fought to stay alert, her body swaying dangerously in the saddle several times. Samuel glanced back occasionally, concern evident in his expression, but he maintained a respectful silence. When they crested a small hill, Lena saw the ranch spread out before them, not the largest she'd ever seen, but well-maintained, with a sturdy two-story house, a large barn, and several corrals. A few men were visible in the distance, working with cattle. "It's not much," Samuel said, mistaking her assessment for disappointment, "but it's peaceful." "It's beautiful," Lena replied honestly. After 2 years of confinement in a small mining town cabin, any open space felt like freedom. Samuel led them directly to the house, helping Lena down from the horse and calling for someone named Miguel to take care of the mare. An older Mexican woman appeared at the door, her weathered face lighting up at the sight of the child. "Señor Samuel, who are these guests?" she asked, her English accented but clear. "This is—" He paused, realizing he hadn't asked her name. "Lena," she supplied cautiously, still unwilling to share her surname. "And this is Emma. They'll be staying with us for a while, Rosa. The little one needs feeding and the lady could use some rest." Rosa nodded, immediately taking charge. Come inside. I have stew on the stove and I can warm some milk for the Niña." Lena followed, too exhausted to resist the motherly command in Rosa's voice. The interior of the house was simple but comfortable, with solid furniture and clean floors. It smelled of pine and something delicious cooking. Sit," Rosa insisted, pulling out a chair at a large wooden table. "I'll bring food." Samuel hung his hat on a peg by the door and moved to the basin in the corner to wash his hands. "Rosa's been with me since I bought this place 5 years ago. She runs the house, and I'd be lost without her." Lena sat, still cradling Emma, who had perked up at the smell of food. Rosa returned with a bowl of stew and a cup of warm milk, which she transferred to a small cup with a spout that she handed to Lena for Emma. "She's too thin," Rosa observed, her dark eyes sharp with concern. "How old?" 18 months, Lena admitted, helping Emma with the cup. Rosa clicked her tongue. "Too small for 18 months. But we'll fix that, won't we, Pequeña?" She patted Emma's head gently before bustling back to the stove for another bowl. Samuel sat across from Lena, his gaze direct but not intrusive. "When you've eaten and rested, you're welcome to tell me what brings you out here alone with a child. Or not. That's your choice." Lena looked up from feeding Emma, surprised by his candor and the absence of demand in his tone. "Thank you," she said simply. They ate in relative silence, broken only by Emma's occasional happy sounds as she devoured the stew Rosa had mashed for her. When they finished, Rosa showed Lena to a small but clean bedroom upstairs. "You rest now," the older woman instructed. "I'll watch the Niña if you like." Lena hesitated, reluctant to let Emma out of her sight. Rosa seemed to understand. "Or she can stay with you. Whatever makes you comfortable, señorita." "Thank you," Lena said, emotion suddenly clogging her throat. "We'll stay together." Rosa nodded, leaving them with fresh linens and a promise to be just downstairs if needed. Alone with Emma, Lena finally allowed herself to cry silent tears of relief, fear, and exhaustion. Emma, with her belly full for the first time in days, quickly fell asleep on the bed. Lena curled around her daughter protectively. intending to rest for just a moment. When she awoke, the light outside had shifted to the golden hue of late afternoon. Emma was still sleeping soundly beside her, her little chest rising and falling in a rhythm that always brought Lena peace. She listened carefully, hearing distant voices downstairs, Samuel and another man, their tones serious. Moving silently, Lena crept to the door and opened it a crack. "Riders asking about a woman and child," the unfamiliar voice was saying. "Said she stole his horse." "And what did you tell them, Pete?" Samuel's voice was calm but held an edge. "Said I hadn't seen nobody matching that description. But Sam, if she's a horse thief—" "She's not a thief," Samuel interrupted firmly. "That's all you need to know. But you only just met her this morning." "How can you be sure?" There was a pause before Samuel replied, his voice lower now. "I've seen enough in this life to know a desperate woman running from something worse than the law. Those men weren't posses or marshals. No badges, no official papers. Just men with guns looking for a woman and child who clearly fear for their lives." Lena's heart pounded. They'd found her trail already. She should have known Victor would send men after her immediately. He would never let her, or more importantly, Emma, go without a fight. So what now? Pete was asking. "Now, you forget you saw them if anyone else comes asking, and I'd appreciate it if you'd keep an eye out for strangers on our property. You're getting involved in something dangerous, Sam," Samuel chuckled, though there was little humor in the sound. "Wouldn't be the first time." Lena closed the door silently and returned to the bed, her mind racing. She needed to leave, and soon. Samuel's kindness was putting him and his people at risk, but the reality was that she had nowhere to go, no plan beyond escaping Castle Dome, and no resources. A soft knock on the door startled her from her thoughts. "Yes," she called softly. Samuel's voice came through the wood. "May I come in, Miss Lena? There's something we need to discuss." Lena straightened her wrinkled dress and smoothed her hair. "Yes, come in." The door opened, and Samuel stepped inside, remaining near the threshold as if to reassure her he wasn't a threat. "I believe we may have some trouble headed our way," he said directly. "Some men came by the north pasture asking questions about a woman and child." Lena's face paled, but she didn't deny it. "I heard. I'm sorry to bring this to your door. We'll leave right away." Samuel shook his head firmly. "That's not why I'm telling you this. I'm telling you because I need to know what we're dealing with if I'm going to help you." "Help me?" Lena repeated, incredulous. "You don't even know me." "I know enough," Samuel replied, his blue eyes unwavering. "I know you're afraid, and I know that little girl needs protection. That's all I need to know for now." Lena studied his face, searching for any sign of deception or ulterior motive. Finding none, she sighed deeply. "Her name is Victor Holloway. He owns half the mines in Castle Dome. I worked for him." The lie tasted bitter on her tongue, but the truth was too shameful to share with this stranger. Samuel nodded, not pressing for details. "And the child, she's yours?" "Yes," Lena answered firmly. "Emma is my daughter, and her father," Lena's eyes flashed, "is not a part of our lives," she said with finality. Samuel held her gaze for a moment, then nodded again. "Fair enough. Here's what I propose. You and Emma stay here, at least until we know whether those men have moved on. The ranch is large, over 2,000 acres. We can keep you safe." "Why would you do this?" Lena asked, suspicion warring with desperate hope. "You don't know me. You have no reason to risk yourself or your ranch for us." Samuel's expression softened slightly. "Let's just say I understand something about needing a second chance." He glanced at Emma, still sleeping peacefully. "Besides, no child should ever have to live in fear." Before Lena could respond, the sound of horses approaching reached them through the open window. Samuel moved quickly to look out, his body tensing. "They're back," he said grimly. "Stay here. Don't make a sound." He left the room, closing the door firmly behind him. Lena immediately gathered Emma into her arms, the child stirring but not fully waking. She moved to the window, keeping well back from the glass, and peered out. 3 men on horseback had stopped in front of the house. Even from a distance, Lena recognized one of them, Jenkins, Victor's most trusted foreman, a man whose cruelty was matched only by his loyalty to his employer. The sight of him made her blood run cold. She could hear Samuel's voice, though not the words, as he stepped onto the porch to meet them. The conversation seemed tense, Jenkins gesturing emphatically while Samuel stood his ground, arms crossed. After several minutes, the men turned their horses and rode away, though not before Jenkins cast a long, suspicious look at the house. Lena sank onto the bed, relief making her limbs weak. But she knew this was only temporary. They would be back, perhaps with more men, perhaps with Victor himself. A few minutes later, Samuel returned to the room. "They're gone for now, but the one in front, Jenkins, he said his name was. I don't think he believed me when I said I hadn't seen you." Lena nodded, unsurprised. Jenkins is persistent. He won't give up easily. "Then we need to make sure you're not here if they return," Samuel said decisively. "I've got a small cabin about 10 miles west of here, up in the foothills. It's not much, but it's well hidden and defensible if it comes to that." "I can't ask you to. You're not asking," Samuel interrupted gently. "I'm offering. We'll leave at first light tomorrow. For tonight, you and Emma should stay in here. Rosa will bring up your supper." Lena wanted to refuse, to insist they leave immediately, but the practical part of her knew that traveling with Emma after dark would be too dangerous. She nodded reluctantly. "Thank you, Mr. Lawson." "Sam," he corrected with the slightest hint of a smile. "If we're going to be hiding out together, you might as well call me Sam." The night passed tensely, with Lena starting at every sound. Emma, however, slept better than she had in months, her little body finally full and comfortable. Rosa brought them a hearty supper and clothes for both Lena and Emma, simple, practical garments that would be better suited to life on the run than Lena's town dress. "My daughters," Rosa explained when Lena questioned the origin of the clothes. "She's married now, lives in Tucson. These will fit you better for riding." By dawn, Lena had barely slept, but she was ready. She dressed Emma in the clothes Rosa had provided, sturdy pants and a small shirt that made her look like a little boy, which Lena realized was probably intentional. Disguising Emma's gender might provide an additional layer of protection. Lena herself changed into riding pants and a loose shirt, covered by a vest. Rosa had even provided a hat to shield her distinctive red hair from view. When she carried Emma downstairs, Samuel was waiting in the kitchen with Rosa, who was packing food into saddlebags. "Good morning," he greeted them, his eyes quickly assessing their readiness. "I've saddled 2 horses. Yours has recovered well with a night's rest and good feed." Lena nodded gratefully. "I can't thank you enough for all this." Samuel waved away her thanks. "We should get moving. I'd like to reach the cabin before midday." They departed as the sun was just beginning to crest the horizon, riding west toward the mountains that loomed in the distance. Emma, securely fastened to Lena's front with a makeshift sling Rosa had created, seemed to enjoy the ride, pointing at birds and chattering in her limited vocabulary. Samuel led them on a circuitous route, often doubling back or crossing streams to obscure their trail. He was clearly experienced in evading pursuit, a fact that made Lena both grateful and curious about his past. "Have you always lived in Arizona territory?" she asked during a brief rest to water the horses. Samuel shook his head, helping Emma drink from his canteen. The child had taken to him immediately, which surprised Lena given Emma's usual wariness around men. "No, I came west after the war, served with the Union Army in Tennessee mostly. His expression grew distant, needed a fresh start afterward. The war changed many people, Lena observed quietly. That it did. Samuel's gaze returned to the present. What about you? You're not originally from these parts either, I'd wager. Lena hesitated but decided that some truth was safe enough. I grew up in St. Louis. My father was a school teacher. She smiled sadly, remembering. He taught me to read Shakespeare before I was 8 years old. And how did you end up in Castle Dome? Samuel asked, his tone careful, giving her space to answer or not. Lena looked away, focusing on adjusting Emma's hat. My parents died of typhoid when I was 19. I had no other family, no money. A man from Victor Holloway's company was in St. Louis recruiting workers for the mines. He said they needed teachers for the children of miners. She laughed bitterly. There was no school, just Victor's house where he kept me as his. She stopped, unable to say the word. You don't have to explain, Samuel said quietly. I understand. Lena looked up sharply, anger flashing in her green eyes. No, you don't understand. No one could understand what it was like to be trapped to be. She trailed off as Emma turned to look at her, responding to the tension in her voice. You're right, Samuel conceded. I don't understand what you went through, but I understand what it means to fight for your freedom and dignity. Something in his tone made Lena think there was more to his story than he was sharing, but before she could ask, he was back on his feet, helping her onto her horse. We should keep moving, he said. The cabin's not far now. The cabin, when they reached it shortly after noon, was indeed small but sturdy, built into the side of a hill with a clear view of the approach from the east. A small stream ran nearby, providing fresh water, and the surrounding pine forest offered both concealment and game. It's not much, Samuel said as he helped Lena down from her horse, but it's safe. Victor Holloway and his men won't find you here. Lena surveyed their new refuge with cautious optimism. It's perfect, she said sincerely. How long have you had this place? Built it my 2nd year here, Samuel replied, unloading supplies from his pack horse. Sometimes a man needs solitude to clear his head. Inside, the cabin was simple but comfortable, with a stone fireplace, a small table with 2 chairs and a bed in the corner. A ladder led to a small loft space that would serve as a second sleeping area. You take the bed with Emma, Samuel said, setting down the last of their supplies. I'll use the loft. Lena frowned. I can't ask you to stay. You've already done more than enough. Samuel's expression grew serious. Lena, those men are still looking for you. I'm not leaving you and Emma alone out here, at least not until we're sure it's safe. She wanted to argue but couldn't deny the logic of his words. Instead, she nodded. Thank you. The next few days settled into a surprisingly comfortable routine. Samuel hunted for fresh meat, while Lena kept the cabin tidy and cared for Emma, who thrived in the peaceful environment. In the evenings, they would sit by the fire, talking quietly after Emma had fallen asleep. Lena learned that Samuel had been a captain in the Union Army, that he had come west seeking redemption for things he'd done during the war, things he still wouldn't speak of directly. He told her about building his ranch from almost nothing, about his dream of breeding horses that combined strength with speed. In turn, she shared more about her childhood in St. Louis, about her father's love of literature and her mother's skill with a needle. She still avoided talking about her time with Victor, but Samuel never pressed. On their 5th night at the cabin, as a thunderstorm raged outside, Emma woke screaming from a nightmare. Lena rushed to comfort her, but the child was inconsolable, her little body racked with sobs. "SHH, Emma, it's all right. Mama's here," Lena murmured, rocking her daughter gently. "The thunder can't hurt you." Samuel appeared from the loft, concern etched on his face. Is she all right? Lena nodded, still stroking Emma's hair. Just frightened by the storm and perhaps. She hesitated. The last time there was thunder like this, Victor was in a rage. He threw things, shouted. Emma remembers, I think. Samuel's expression darkened. Without a word, he moved to the fireplace, stoked the dying embers, and added another log. The room brightened as the fire caught, pushing back the shadows that had made Emma's fears worse. Then he sat in the chair opposite Lena and began to hum softly, a gentle melody that somehow cut through Emma's cries. The child paused, hiccuping, and turned toward the sound. My mother used to sing this when I was afraid, Samuel explained quietly. I don't remember all the words, but the tune always stayed with me. He continued humming, and gradually Emma's sobs subsided. Her eyes, still wet with tears, began to droop. Within minutes, she was asleep again in Lena's arms. Thank you, Lena whispered, touched by his simple kindness. Samuel smiled, a genuine warmth reaching his eyes. You're doing a fine job with her, Lena. She's lucky to have such a brave mother. I don't feel brave, Lena admitted. Most days I'm terrified. Terrified he'll find us. Terrified I won't be able to keep her safe or provide for her. That's exactly what makes you brave, Samuel replied. Being afraid but acting anyway for someone you love, there's no greater courage than that. Their eyes met across the fire-lit room, and something shifted between them, a recognition, perhaps, of kindred spirits. Lena looked away first, suddenly aware of her disheveled appearance and the intimacy of the moment. You should try to get some rest, Samuel said softly, standing. Tomorrow I need to ride back to the ranch, check that everything's all right. Lena's head snapped up, fear immediately returning. You're leaving? Just for the day, he assured her. I'll be back by sundown. You and Emma will be safe here. No one knows about this place except Rosa, and she'd die before telling anyone. Lena wanted to protest, but knew he had responsibilities at his ranch that he'd neglected for days because of them. Of course, we'll be fine. Sleep eluded her long after Samuel had returned to the loft. The storm eventually passed, leaving a hushed stillness broken only by the soft sound of Emma's breathing and the occasional creak of the cabin's timbers. When morning came, Samuel prepared to leave, checking his rifle and pistol before mounting his horse. Bar the door behind me, he instructed Lena, who stood in the doorway with Emma on her hip. There's another rifle above the fireplace if you need it. Lena nodded, trying to project confidence she didn't feel. We'll be fine, be careful. Samuel tipped his hat. Always am, madam. With a final nod, he turned his horse and rode down the path that led away from the cabin. The day stretched endlessly without him. Lena kept busy, washing clothes in the stream, gathering berries she recognized as safe from her childhood, foraging with her father, and playing with Emma. But her ears strained for any unusual sound, and her eyes constantly scanned the trees surrounding the cabin. By late afternoon, Emma was napping, and Lena sat by the window, a book from Samuel's small shelf open on her lap, though she wasn't reading. The sound of approaching horses made her freeze, then scramble for the rifle above the fireplace. Heart pounding, she checked that Emma was still sleeping before moving silently to the window. What she saw made her blood run cold. 3 riders approaching, and at their head was Jenkins, Victor's foreman. How had they found the cabin? Had someone from the ranch betrayed them? Or had they simply been searching the foothills and stumbled upon it? There was no time to wonder. Lena moved quickly to where Emma slept, gently shaking her awake. Emma, sweetheart, we need to be very quiet now, she whispered, her mind racing. The cabin had a small cellar, accessible through a trapdoor beneath the rug. Samuel had shown it to her, explaining that he sometimes stored game there in the cooler months. It wasn't large, but it might just be big enough for her and Emma. Quickly, she lifted the rug and opened the trapdoor, wincing at the slight creak of the hinges. "Emma, we're going to play a game," she whispered, forcing a smile. "We're going to hide like when we play peek-a-boo, but we have to be very, very quiet." Emma, still groggy from her nap, nodded solemnly. Lena lowered her into the dark space first, then climbed down after her, pulling the trapdoor closed above them. The cellar was barely 4 feet high, forcing Lena to crouch. It smelled of earth and stored food and was pitch black once the trapdoor closed. "Mama scared," Emma whispered, pressing against Lena. It's all right," Lena soothed, though her own heart was racing. "Remember, we have to be quiet for the game." Above them, she heard the thud of boots on the porch, then a sharp knock on the door. Silence followed, then the sound of the door being forced open. "Search everything," Jenkins' voice commanded. "They're here somewhere." Lena held her breath, one hand over Emma's mouth to ensure her daughter stayed silent. Footsteps moved across the floor above them, accompanied by the sounds of furniture being moved and cupboards being opened. "Nothing here, Jenkins," a voice reported. "Place looks lived in, though. Food in the pantry, clothes hanging to dry outside." "They can't be far then," Jenkins replied. "Check outside, see if there's a trail. They might have spotted us coming and run." The footsteps retreated, and Lena allowed herself a small sigh of relief. But her relief was short-lived as she heard one set of footsteps return, moving slowly, deliberately across the floor. They stopped directly above the trapdoor. Lena's heart nearly stopped. Had they found their hiding place? She pulled Emma closer, preparing to fight if necessary, though she knew it would be futile against armed men. The footsteps moved again, circling the room slowly. Then Jenkins spoke, though not to his men. "I know you can hear me, Lena. Victor's offering a reward for your return, you and the child both. $500. That's a lot of money for most folks in these parts." A pause. "He's not angry anymore, says he just wants his family back." Lena bit her lip hard enough to taste blood, fighting the urge to scream that they were not Victor's family, that they never had been. "We'll find you, Lena," Jenkins continued, his voice dropping to a menacing tone. "Might as well make it easier on yourself and the girl. Victor won't be so forgiving if we have to drag you back." The footsteps finally moved toward the door, and Lena heard Jenkins call to his men. "Let's check the stream, see if there's any sign of them there." Silence fell, but Lena didn't dare move. It could be a trick to lure them out. They remained in the cellar, Emma growing increasingly restless in the confines of the dark space. Lena whispered stories to keep her quiet, all the while straining to hear any sound that would indicate the men had truly left. After what felt like hours but was probably no more than 45 minutes, Lena heard the sound of a single horse approaching. Her body tensed again, prepared for the return of Jenkins and his men. But then came a familiar voice, urgent and concerned. "Lena, Emma." Samuel called, his footsteps heavy on the porch. "Are you here?" Relief flooded through Lena so intensely she nearly cried out. Instead, she carefully pushed open the trapdoor, the light momentarily blinding after so long in darkness. "Samuel," she called softly, lifting Emma out of the cellar before climbing out herself. "We're here." Samuel appeared in the doorway, his face tight with worry and something else, anger perhaps. When he saw them, the tension visibly left his body. "Thank God," he breathed, crossing the room in long strides. Without hesitation, he pulled Lena and Emma into an embrace that surprised her with its intensity. "I saw their tracks leading here," he said, his voice rough. "Crossed paths with them on my way back. They didn't see me, I thought." He didn't finish the thought. Lena pulled back slightly, looking up at him. "They searched the cabin. We hid in the cellar." Samuel nodded, his eyes dark with emotion. "Smart thinking." He looked around the disturbed cabin, his expression grim. "We can't stay here now, they know about this place." "Where can we go?" Lena asked, despair threatening to overwhelm her. "They'll check your ranch next." "Not if we're not there to find," Samuel replied, already moving to gather their few belongings. "I came back to warn you. Rosa sent word that Jenkins and his men had been asking questions in town, showing a lot of money around. Someone must have talked." "Then where?" Lena repeated, helping Emma into her coat. Samuel paused, meeting her eyes directly. "Mexico. It's our best option now. I know people there, good people who will help us until we can figure out something more permanent." The word "us" didn't escape Lena's notice. "Samuel, this is my problem, not yours. You've already risked too much." His expression softened. "Lena, I made my choice the moment I found you by that creek. I'm not abandoning you and Emma now." He hesitated, then added more quietly, "Unless you'd rather I didn't come with you." The thought of continuing without him filled Lena with a dread that surprised her with its intensity. In just over a week, Samuel had become essential to her sense of safety, to her hope for the future. The realization was frightening in its own way. "No," she admitted finally. "We want you with us. But Samuel, crossing into Mexico means leaving everything behind. Your ranch, your life here." "Some things are worth leaving behind for the right reasons," he replied simply. They worked quickly, packing only what they could carry on horseback. Samuel insisted they wait until full dark before departing, to minimize the chance of being spotted. As they prepared to leave, Emma now sleeping against Lena's chest, Samuel paused at the door, looking back at the cabin that had been their refuge. "I always thought I'd find peace here," he said quietly. "Never expected it would come in such a different form." Lena reached out hesitantly, touching his arm. "I'm sorry for bringing this trouble to you." Samuel covered her hand with his own. "Don't be. For the first time in years, I feel like I'm doing exactly what I should be doing." His eyes held hers in the dim light. "Sometimes the things we think we want aren't what we need at all." They rode south under the cover of darkness, Samuel leading them along game trails and dry creek beds to avoid leaving obvious tracks. Emma, secured in the sling across Lena's chest, slept through most of the journey, lulled by the steady movement of the horse. By dawn, they had covered nearly 20 miles, the mountains giving way to more arid terrain as they approached the border. Samuel called a halt near a small spring sheltered by cottonwood trees. "We'll rest here for a few hours," he said, helping Lena down from her horse. "There's a settlement about 15 miles ahead, San Miguel. I have friends there who will help us cross into Mexico safely." Lena nodded, too exhausted to speak. She settled Emma on a blanket in the shade, the child still sleeping soundly despite the uncomfortable journey. Then she sank down beside her daughter, her own eyes heavy with fatigue. Samuel tended to the horses, then brought Lena water from the spring. "Try to sleep," he advised, sitting beside her. "I'll keep watch." "You need rest too," Lena protested weakly. Samuel smiled, the expression softening his weathered features. "I'll rest when you're safe." Lena wanted to argue but found her eyelids drooping despite her best efforts. Just before sleep claimed her, she felt the gentle weight of Samuel's jacket being laid over her and Emma. She woke to the sound of Emma's hungry cries and the smell of coffee brewing over a small, carefully banked fire. Samuel was feeding the child strips of dried beef softened in water, his large hands surprisingly gentle as he helped Emma manage the food. "Good morning," he greeted when he noticed Lena was awake. "Or rather, good afternoon. You needed the sleep." Lena sat up, disoriented by the sun's position. "How long was I asleep?" "About 6 hours," Samuel replied, passing her a cup of coffee. "Don't worry, I've been watching. No sign of pursuit." Lena accepted the coffee gratefully, the hot liquid reviving her. "Emma seems to have taken to you," she observed, watching as her daughter happily accepted another piece of beef from Samuel's hand. "She's an easy child to care for," he replied, his expression softening as he looked at Emma. "Reminds me of my sister's children before." He trailed off, and Lena didn't press. There was still much about Samuel's past she didn't know, just as there was much about hers he hadn't asked about. Somehow, those gaps didn't seem to matter anymore. They resumed their journey as the heat of the day began to wane, riding steadily south. The landscape grew increasingly barren, with only occasional clusters of mesquite or yucca breaking the monotony. "Samuel," Lena ventured after they had been riding for some time, "what will you do once we reach Mexico? Your ranch." "Already taken care of," he replied without turning. "I've been preparing for something like this for years, though I didn't know it would be for this reason. Rosa knows what to do. She'll tell Pete I've gone east on family business. The ranch will continue running and the proceeds will be sent to a bank in Hermosillo." He glanced back at her. "I'm not as unprepared as you might think." "But why?" Lena pressed. "Why would you have preparations for suddenly leaving everything behind?" Samuel was silent for so long that Lena thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, almost as if he were speaking to himself. "During the war, I did things I'm not proud of. Things that haunt me. When it ended, I came west thinking I could outrun those memories." He shook his head. "But they followed me. There are men who still remember Captain Samuel Lawson and what he did at Cold Harbor." Lena waited, sensing there was more. "3 years ago, a man recognized me in Tucson, said his brother had died under my command, died needlessly because of an order I gave." Samuel's shoulders tensed visibly. He was right. "I sent 43 men to their deaths that day because I was too proud to admit I'd made a tactical error. He wanted revenge, but I managed to talk him down. Made me realize, though, that my past could find me anytime. So I made arrangements, just in case I ever needed to disappear quickly." "I'm sorry," Lena said softly, understanding better now the shadows she sometimes saw in his eyes. Samuel turned in his saddle to look at her directly. "Don't be. We all have things we're running from, Lena. The difference is whether we're running away from something or toward something better." His gaze dropped to Emma, who was playing with the fringe on Lena's saddle. "I think I'm finally running toward something." The sincerity in his voice made Lena's heart beat faster. She hadn't allowed herself to think beyond escape, beyond keeping Emma safe. The possibility of something more, a future that included Samuel, was both exhilarating and terrifying. They reached San Miguel as twilight deepened into true night. The settlement was small, just a cluster of adobe buildings surrounding a central plaza with a modest church at one end. Despite the late hour, several people were still about, and a few called greetings to Samuel in Spanish. He led them to a house at the edge of town, where an elderly man with a deeply lined face welcomed them warmly, embracing Samuel as if he were a long-lost son. "Lena, this is Miguel Vega," Samuel introduced them. "He helped me establish my ranch years ago. Miguel, esta es Lena y su hija Emma." The old man smiled, taking Lena's hand between both of his. "Bienvenida, señorita. Any friend of Samuel's is welcome in my home." Miguel's wife, Consuela, emerged from the kitchen, her round face lighting up at the sight of Emma. Within minutes, they were seated at a table laden with simple but delicious food: beans, tortillas, and a spicy stew that made Lena's eyes water but that Emma devoured enthusiastically. After the meal, while Miguel and Samuel discussed their plans in low voices, Consuela showed Lena to a small bedroom where she could bathe Emma and herself. The warm water and clean clothes Consuela provided felt like unimaginable luxuries after days on the trail. When Emma was finally asleep on the small bed, Lena rejoined the others in the main room. Samuel and Miguel fell silent as she entered, exchanging a look she couldn't interpret. "Is everything all right?" she asked, suddenly anxious. Samuel nodded, gesturing for her to join them at the table. "Miguel has news. Victor Holloway has men watching the main border crossings. They're offering $100 to anyone who spots us." Lena's heart sank. "So we can't cross into Mexico?" "Not by the usual routes," Miguel interjected. "But there are other ways, known only to those of us who have lived on both sides of the border our whole lives. Miguel has arranged for a guide to take us through the Sierra Madre foothills," Samuel explained. "It's a harder journey but safer from pursuit. When do we leave?" Lena asked, already mentally preparing for another difficult trek. "Tomorrow night," Samuel replied. "Miguel thinks it's best if we rest here tomorrow, then travel under cover of darkness. The border is only about 20 miles south of here, but the terrain is rough." Lena nodded, trusting his judgment. "Thank you, Miguel," she said sincerely. "We've brought danger to your door, and still you help us." The old man smiled gently. "Samuel saved my grandson's life many years ago when the boy was bitten by a rattlesnake. There is nothing I wouldn't do to repay that debt." He rose, his movements slow but dignified. "Now you should rest. Tomorrow will come soon enough." After Miguel and Consuela had retired to their room, Lena and Samuel sat alone at the table, the house quiet save for the soft ticking of a clock on the wall. "Are you sure about this?" Lena asked quietly. "Once we cross into Mexico, there's no coming back, not with Victor's influence spreading." Samuel reached across the table, his hand covering hers. "I'm sure, Lena, more sure than I've been about anything in a very long time." The warmth of his hand and the certainty in his voice chased away the last of Lena's doubts. Whatever lay ahead, they would face it together. The next day passed slowly, with Lena and Samuel staying inside Miguel's house to avoid being seen by curious neighbors. Emma enjoyed the attention from Consuela, who seemed delighted to have a child in her home again. As evening approached, Miguel's grandson, Pablo, arrived with news that increased the urgency of their departure. Victor Holloway himself had been seen in a town 40 miles north, accompanied by a larger group of men. The hunt was intensifying. Their guide, a wiry man named Esteban with skin darkened by years in the sun, arrived just after sunset. He spoke little English, but conveyed through Miguel that they would travel light and fast, following trails that would be difficult for horses, but would keep them away from the more traveled routes where Holloway's men might be watching. They said their goodbyes to Miguel and Consuela, who pressed packages of food and a small wooden toy for Emma into their hands. Samuel embraced the old couple warmly, speaking rapid Spanish that Lena couldn't follow, but that made Consuela dab at her eyes with her apron. Then they were moving again, following Esteban into the gathering darkness. The terrain quickly became more challenging, with loose rocks underfoot and steep inclines that left Lena breathless. Emma, secured to Samuel's back now to give Lena a break, seemed to view the journey as a grand adventure, pointing excitedly at the stars overhead and chattering quietly. They walked through the night, stopping only briefly for water and rest. Esteban set a punishing pace, but neither Lena nor Samuel complained, understanding the necessity of speed. As dawn approached, they reached a narrow pass between two towering rock formations. Esteban held up a hand, signaling them to stop, then pointed beyond the pass. "Mexico," he said simply, one of the few English words he seemed to know. Lena felt a surge of hope. They were so close to relative safety, to a new beginning. Samuel, standing beside her with Emma now asleep in his arms, smiled down at her, his expression mirroring her own relief. But as they prepared to move through the pass, the sound of horses approaching from behind shattered their moment of triumph. Esteban muttered something in Spanish, his expression darkening. "Riders," Samuel translated grimly, passing the sleeping Emma to Lena. "At least 3, maybe 4. He reached for his rifle, which he'd been carrying across his back. "Go with Esteban. Get through the pass and keep moving." "No," Lena protested, clutching Emma tighter. "We stay together." "Lena, please," Samuel urged, his eyes intense. "I'll hold them off, buy you time. I'll follow as soon as I can." Before she could argue further, the riders appeared on the trail behind them, 4 men, as Samuel had guessed, and at their head was Jenkins. They hadn't been spotted yet, the pre-dawn darkness and the rocky terrain providing some concealment, but discovery was only moments away. Esteban tugged at Lena's arm, gesturing urgently toward the pass. But she stood her ground, her decision made. "I'm not leaving you," she told Samuel firmly. "Not now, not ever." Something flashed in his eyes, pride perhaps, or a deeper emotion she wasn't ready to name. He nodded once, then motioned for them all to take cover behind a large boulder near the entrance to the pass. "Esteban," Samuel whispered, "is there another way through? A place we could ambush them if they follow?" The guide considered for a moment, then nodded, pointing to a narrow ledge that ran along the side of one of the rock formations. It would be treacherous, especially in the dark, but it might allow them to circle around behind their pursuers. Samuel quickly outlined a plan. Esteban would take Lena and Emma along the ledge while Samuel created a distraction to draw the riders away from the pass. Once they were safely through to the Mexican side, Samuel would follow, using the confusion to slip away. It wasn't perfect, but it was their best chance. Lena agreed reluctantly, knowing that Emma's safety had to come first. She reached out to touch Samuel's face, a gesture of both farewell and promise. "Be careful," she whispered. "Always," he replied with a ghost of a smile. "Now go." Esteban led Lena to the base of the ledge, helping her climb up with Emma secured tightly to her chest. The child remained mercifully asleep, the excitement of the journey having finally exhausted her. The ledge was barely wide enough for one person, forcing Lena to press her back against the rock face and inch along sideways, following Esteban's sure-footed progress. Below them, the ground fell away steeply, making Lena's head swim if she looked down. They had covered perhaps 50 yards when the sound of a gunshot split the pre-dawn silence, followed by the shouts of men and more gunfire. Samuel had sprung his distraction. Lena forced herself to keep moving, though every instinct screamed at her to turn back, to help Samuel somehow. Esteban urged her on with gestures and occasional whispered encouragements in Spanish. The gunfire continued sporadically, sometimes closer, sometimes farther away, as if the participants were moving through the rocky terrain. Then there was a louder shot, a rifle rather than a pistol, and a cry of pain that made Lena's blood run cold. "Samuel," she whispered, her heart pounding, had he been hit? Or had he struck one of their pursuers? There was no way to know. Esteban, sensing her distress, pointed ahead to where the ledge widened and began to descend toward a small plateau. They were almost through the pass, almost to safety. Just as they reached the wider section of ledge, Emma woke, startled by another distant gunshot. "Mama?" she asked, her voice too loud in the tense silence. "SHH, Emma," Lena soothed, but it was too late. The sound had carried in the still air, and a shout from below confirmed that they had been spotted. A bullet ricocheted off the rock face above their heads, showering them with fragments of stone. Esteban pushed Lena down into a crouching position, shielding her and Emma with his own body as best he could. "Run," he urged in accented English, pointing to the plateau below. "I hold them." Lena hesitated, unwilling to abandon another protector, but Emma's safety had to come first. With a nod of gratitude to Esteban, she began to make her way down the slope toward the plateau, moving as quickly as she dared with Emma clutched to her chest. Behind her, Esteban fired his pistol down at their pursuers, the shots echoing off the rock walls. Lena didn't look back, focusing only on reaching the relative safety of the plateau with its scattered boulders and stunted trees that could provide cover. She was halfway down when a scream of pain made her turn. Esteban had been hit, his body falling from the ledge to the ground below. Lena bit back a cry of horror, forcing herself to keep moving. There was nothing she could do for him now. She reached the plateau just as the eastern sky began to lighten with the first hints of dawn. Looking frantically for cover, she spotted a dense thicket of mesquite and cactus about 50 yards away. It wasn't ideal, but it might hide them long enough for help to arrive if Samuel was still alive to bring it. Emma, sensing her mother's fear, remained remarkably quiet, her little face solemn as Lena carried her toward the thicket. They had almost reached it when a voice called out from behind them. "That's far enough, Lena." She froze, recognizing Jenkins' voice. Slowly, she turned to face him, instinctively positioning her body to shield Emma. Jenkins stood at the edge of the plateau, rifle aimed steadily at her. His face was streaked with dirt and what looked like blood, and his left arm hung awkwardly at his side. "Victor wants you back," he said, his voice flat. "Both of you." "Where's Samuel?" Lena demanded, her eyes searching the pass behind Jenkins for any sign of him. A cruel smile twisted Jenkins' lips. "Your cowboy friend took care of him, put up a good fight, I'll give him that. Killed 2 of my men before we got him." Grief threatened to overwhelm Lena, but she pushed it down, focusing on the immediate danger. "I'm not going back, Jenkins. Not to Victor, not ever." "You don't have a choice," Jenkins replied, taking a step closer. "Now hand over the kid and start walking." "No," Lena said firmly, backing away. "Emma stays with me." Jenkins' expression hardened. "Victor said to bring you both back alive if possible, but he also said one of you is better than neither." He raised his rifle, aiming it directly at Lena's heart. "Last chance." Lena clutched Emma tighter, her mind racing. There was nowhere to run, no way to fight back. She closed her eyes briefly, whispering an apology to her daughter for failing to keep her safe. The crack of a gunshot made Lena flinch, but strangely, she felt no pain. Opening her eyes, she saw Jenkins stagger, a look of surprise on his face as he dropped to his knees, his rifle falling from nerveless fingers. Behind him, emerging from the shadows of the pass, was Samuel, his own rifle still raised, a thin trail of smoke curling from the barrel. His shirt was torn and blood-stained, his face scratched and bruised, but he was gloriously, wonderfully alive. "Samuel!" Lena cried, relief making her knees weak. He lowered his rifle, his eyes never leaving Jenkins, who was now face down on the ground and not moving. "Are you all right?" he called, making his way toward them. "Yes," Lena answered, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, we're fine, but Esteban—" "I know," Samuel said grimly as he reached them. "I found him on my way through. He died trying to protect you, a brave man." Emma, who had been quiet throughout the confrontation, suddenly reached for Samuel, little arms extended. "Sam," she said clearly, surprising both adults. A smile broke through Samuel's grim expression as he took Emma from Lena's arms. "Hello, little one, you're safe now." Lena watched them, her heart full despite the danger they had just survived. "I thought you were dead," she admitted, her voice breaking. Jenkins said. "Jenkins was always better at lying than shooting," Samuel replied, his free arm going around her shoulders in a protective gesture. "I managed to take out 2 of his men and wound him before they cornered me in a ravine. Thought I was done for, but they were in such a hurry to catch up to you that they didn't make sure." His expression darkened. "They should have made sure. What do we do now?" Lena asked, glancing at Jenkins' still form. "There could be more men coming." Samuel nodded, already guiding them toward the Mexican side of the pass. "We keep moving. Hermosillo is about a week's journey from here. I have friends there too, people who can help us start over." "Start over," Lena repeated, the words sounding almost like a prayer. She looked up at Samuel, at the determined set of his jaw and the gentleness with which he held Emma. "Together," his eyes met hers and the emotion in them took her breath away. "Together," he confirmed. "If that's what you want." "It's what I want," Lena said softly. "More than anything." They made their way down from the plateau as the sun began to rise in earnest, illuminating a landscape of rugged beauty stretching as far as the eye could see. Mexico, their new home, their new beginning. The journey to Hermosillo was arduous but uneventful. They traveled by day now, no longer needing to hide under cover of darkness. Samuel's wound, a bullet graze along his ribs, proved painful but not serious, and Lena tended it with herbs she gathered along the way, remembering remedies her mother had taught her long ago. Emma thrived despite the hardships of travel, her natural resilience and curiosity making each day an adventure. She took to calling Samuel Papa Sam, a development that brought a flush of pleasure to his face each time he heard it. They reached Hermosillo in early October, the desert heat finally beginning to wane. Samuel's friends, a Spanish couple named Alvarez, who owned a prosperous cattle ranch outside the city, welcomed them with open arms, asking no questions about their sudden appearance. Señor Alvarez offered Samuel work as a foreman, and Señora Alvarez insisted that Lena and Emma stay in their guest house until they could establish a place of their own. It was more kindness than Lena had experienced in years, and it brought tears to her eyes more than once. They had been in Hermosillo for nearly a month when Samuel approached Lena one evening as she sat on the porch of the guest house, watching Emma play with the Alvarez grandchildren in the yard. "Walk with me," he asked, extending his hand. Lena nodded, accepting his hand and allowing him to lead her away from the house, down a path that wound through an orchard of orange and lemon trees. The scent of citrus blossoms filled the air, sweet and promising. They walked in comfortable silence for a while, their fingers intertwined. Finally, Samuel stopped beneath a particularly large orange tree, its branches heavy with fruit. "I received word from Miguel today," he said, turning to face her. "Victor Holloway is dead." Lena's breath caught. "Dead? How?" "Shot in a dispute over a gambling debt, apparently," Samuel replied. The irony being that the man who killed him was one of his own hired guns, a man named Riker who Jenkins had brought in to track us. Lena absorbed this news, unsure how to feel. Relief, certainly, that they no longer needed to look over their shoulders. But there was also a strange emptiness, as if a chapter had closed without proper resolution. "What does this mean for us?" she asked finally. Samuel took both her hands in his expression serious. "It means we're truly free, Lena, free to go anywhere, do anything." He hesitated, then continued, "Including go back to Arizona if that's what you want." Lena shook her head immediately. "No, there's nothing for us there. Everything I want." She looked up at him, allowing the feelings she'd been nurturing these past weeks to show plainly on her face. "Everything I want is here." Samuel's eyes softened, and he released one of her hands to reach into his pocket. When he withdrew it, he was holding a small silver ring set with a single turquoise stone. "I've been carrying this since we left San Miguel," he admitted. "Bought it from a silversmith there with what little money I had left. It's not much, but—" He took a deep breath. "Lena Owen, I love you. I love Emma as if she were my own. Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" Tears welled in Lena's eyes, but they were tears of joy, not sorrow. "Yes," she whispered, her voice strong despite the emotion clogging her throat. "Yes, Samuel, I will." He slipped the ring onto her finger, then drew her into his arms, his kiss tender yet passionate, a promise of all the years to come. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Lena rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "I never thought I'd find this," she said softly. "After everything with Victor, I didn't think I could ever trust again, ever love again." Samuel's arms tightened around her. "And I never thought I deserved it, thought I'd spend the rest of my life alone, paying for my past mistakes." He tilted her chin up, his gaze intense. "You and Emma gave me a reason to believe in second chances." "We'll build something beautiful here," Lena promised. "A life full of love and laughter, the kind of home Emma deserves. The kind of home we all deserve," Samuel corrected gently. "And maybe someday a brother or sister for Emma." Lena smiled, warmth spreading through her at the thought. "I'd like that." They were married 2 weeks later in the small church in Hermosillo, with the Alvarez family and a few close friends as witnesses. Emma, dressed in a new white dress that Senora Alvarez had sewn for her, served as flower girl, solemnly dropping rose petals from the Alvarez garden as she walked down the aisle. Samuel had used some of the money from his Arizona bank account to purchase a small property on the outskirts of Hermosillo, 10 acres with a modest house, a barn, and good water access. It wasn't as grand as his ranch in Arizona had been, but as he told Lena, it was a perfect place to start anew. They moved in a week after the wedding, Emma running excitedly from room to room, claiming the small bedroom with windows overlooking the garden as her own. Lena stood in the doorway of their new home, watching as Samuel carried in the last of their few possessions, and felt a contentment she had never thought possible. That night, after Emma had finally fallen asleep in her new bed, Lena and Samuel sat on the porch, watching the stars appear one by one in the clear desert sky. "Happy?" Samuel asked, his arm around her shoulders. "More than I can say," Lena replied honestly. "It still feels like a dream sometimes, like I'll wake up and be back in that cabin in Castle Dome with Victor." Samuel's arm tightened protectively. "That's over, Lena. It's just a memory now and not one you need to carry anymore," she nodded, leaning into his embrace. "I know, it's just—" It was so dark for so long, and now everything is light and hope and possibility. Sometimes it's overwhelming. "One day at a time," Samuel suggested. "That's how we'll build this life together, just one day at a time." "I like that," Lena agreed, turning to smile up at him. "And I love you, Samuel Lawson." "And I love you, Lena Lawson," he replied, the name still new and wonderful to both of them. Inside the house, Emma called out in her sleep, a small sound that had both parents instantly alert. But it wasn't a cry of distress, just the murmurings of a child deep in dreams. They relaxed, exchanging smiles of understanding. "I should probably check on her," Lena said, rising from her seat. Samuel stood as well, taking her hand. "We'll both go." Together, they walked into their new home, their new life, leaving behind the shadows of the past and moving toward a future bright with promise and love. Over the years that followed, the small property outside Hermosillo flourished under their care. Samuel's knowledge of horses proved valuable, and he began breeding and training quality mounts that soon gained a reputation throughout the region. Lena, drawing on her education, started a small school for the children of neighboring ranches, teaching English, mathematics, and literature under the shade of a ramada they built specifically for that purpose. Emma grew into a confident, bilingual child with her mother's red hair, and a spirit of adventure inherited from both her parents. When she was 5, she gained a brother, James Miguel Lawson, born on a warm spring night with Senora Alvarez serving as midwife. 2 years later, a sister joined the family, Maria Rose, named for both Samuel's mother and the woman who had helped them in Castle Dome. On Emma's 8th birthday, as they celebrated with a small gathering of friends and neighbors, Samuel took Lena aside, his expression unusually serious. "I received a letter from Pete today," he said, referring to his former ranch hand from Arizona. "He's been managing the property all these years, sending the profits south as we arranged. He says the territory has changed a lot since we left. Castle Dome is almost a ghost town now the silver played out, and most folks moved on." Lena nodded, waiting for him to continue, sensing there was more. "Pete thinks we could come back if we wanted to. No one's looking for us anymore, not with Victor gone and Jenkins presumed dead in Mexico." Samuel hesitated. "The ranch is still ours, Lena. It could be a legacy for the children someday." Lena glanced across the yard to where Emma was showing her younger siblings how to play a game with colored stones. The children were laughing, their faces alight with joy and security. "What are you saying, Samuel? Do you want to go back?" He shook his head immediately. "No, this is our home now. This is where we've built our life together." He took her hands in his. "But I want the children to know they have choices, that their future isn't limited to just this place, no matter how much we love it." Lena considered his words. The thought of returning to Arizona still made her uneasy, but the fear that had once dominated her life was gone. "Perhaps when they're older we could visit," she suggested. "Show them where their story began." Samuel smiled, relief evident in his expression. "I'd like that." He pulled her into an embrace, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Thank you, Lena, for giving me this life. For trusting me that day by the creek." Lena leaned back to look into his eyes, the same blue that had first captured her attention nearly a decade ago. "Thank you for seeing past my fear to who I could be, for loving Emma as your own from the very beginning." Their moment was interrupted by Emma herself, running up to tug at their hands. "Mama, Papa, come see. James is trying to dance like Senor Alvarez taught us, but he keeps falling down." Laughing, they allowed their daughter to pull them back to the celebration, back to the family they had created against all odds. Later that night, as they prepared for bed, Lena found herself thinking about the journey that had brought them here, the desperate flight from Castle Dome, the chance meeting with Samuel, the terrifying chase to the border. So much could have gone differently, so many moments where fate might have turned against them. "What are you thinking about?" Samuel asked, coming up behind her and placing his hands gently on her shoulders. "About those iron shackles Victor kept on the door of our cabin," Lena replied honestly. "The ones he threatened to use if I ever tried to leave again. Please, I beg you, take them off," I said to him once after Emma was born. I was so afraid he would use them that we would never escape. Samuel turned her to face him, his expression somber. "But you did escape. You found the courage to run, to protect your child at all costs." Lena nodded, remembering the night she had finally fled, carrying Emma bundled against her chest. "And then you found us, found her, hidden beneath my shawl." She smiled, the memory no longer painful. "My cowboy hero." "I'd say we saved each other," Samuel replied, drawing her close. "And we'll keep doing that every day for the rest of our lives." As the years passed, their roots in Mexico grew deeper. James followed in his father's footsteps, showing a natural affinity for horses and the land. Maria became a teacher like her mother, eventually taking over the small school Lena had established. And Emma, always the adventurer, married the son of a local doctor and moved to Mexico City, where she established a clinic serving the poorest residents. Lena and Samuel never did return to Arizona. though they sent the children north once, when they were old enough to appreciate the journey, to see the ranch that remained in the family name. The stories they brought back of deserted mining towns and changing borders, of new settlers and old ghosts, satisfied whatever lingering curiosity Samuel might have had about the life they had left behind. In their 60th year, as they sat on the same porch where they had begun their life together, watching their grandchildren play in the yard that had witnessed so many birthdays, anniversaries, and simple daily joys, Samuel took Lena's hand, his touch as gentle as ever despite the passage of time. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked. "Any of it?" Lena turned to him, her face lined with age but her eyes still bright with the same spirit that had carried her through those desperate days of escape. "Never," she said firmly. "Not one moment of this life we've built." Samuel smiled, the expression crinkling the corners of his eyes. "Nor I. Every day has been a gift, Lena, every single day." And it had been. From that first desperate meeting by a creek in the Arizona wilderness, to this peaceful evening surrounded by the fruits of their love and labor, every moment a testament to courage, to second chances, and to the enduring power of love to heal even the deepest wounds. "You know," Lena said thoughtfully, watching their oldest grandson showing his younger cousin how to lasso a fence post, "I sometimes think about what might have happened if you hadn't found us that day. If you had taken a different trail, or if we had hidden when we heard you coming." Samuel shook his head. "I don't believe in coincidences, Lena. I believe we were meant to find each other, meant to build this life together." He squeezed her hand gently. "Some things are simply written in the stars." Lena smiled, leaning against his shoulder. "Then I'm grateful to those stars, and to whatever fate brought you to us when we needed you most." As the sun set on another day in their long and beautiful life together, Lena Owen Lawson knew with absolute certainty that the frightened woman who had once whispered, "Please, I beg you, take them off," in desperation could never have imagined the freedom, the joy, and the love that awaited her. Not all shackles were made of iron, and not all cowboys wore badges. Sometimes, the truest heroes were simply good men with kind hearts, brave enough to see beyond fear to the possibility of love. And sometimes, the happiest endings came from the darkest beginnings.